Hello and welcome to MTG Deck Tech. Today we're going to do another deck deep dive, which we haven't done in a while, but I think now I have a deck that's gonna be very nice for that. It's the Grixis Walkers deck. So I made this deck because I had a lot of problem playing against Field of the Dead decks, as most of you might have encountered. And yeah, I had a lot of difficulty with it. It will probably get banned soon, but this deck is also good against other decks. So, but the main point was to find something that is good against the Field of the Dead. So this is a control deck. I don't really do that many control decks because I never find one that is very good in best of one. But this one is very nice in best of one games. It is based on the Jeskai Planeswalker deck with Fires of Invention that a lot of people played, and I also tried a few times. But I think the Grixis version of this Planeswalker deck is even better because it has more ways of removal, it has better ways to have win conditions in the late game, and yeah, it's not that dependent on Fires of Invention as the Jeskai version. So what do we have here? We have a deck that is basically has its win condition of playing Fires of Invention and then playing big cards from your main board and from your sideboard. So as always, I'm going to go through all of those cards. I'm going to do a gameplay video probably on Thursday, but in this video I'm just going to tell you what every card in this deck does. So let's just discuss the most important card first. It's Fires of Invention. Fires of Invention gives you the ability to cast up to 2 spells on your own turn. So it is a bit of a reduction of the things you can do, but you don't have to pay any mana cost to play these spells. So it's basically possible if you have the Fires of Invention out and you have, for example, 5 lands, you can play a Sarkhan and you play a Nicol Bolas on the same turn, which of course is very, very powerful, especially in the mid game. In the late game, where everybody has as much mana, it's not that impactful, but it also fixes your colors. So you can play cards from each color combination so you can play cards from each color combination you want without having to have the mana in your deck. So I only have Grixis mana, but in the sideboard, which we will discuss a bit later, I have cards like Garruk or something else, white cards you can't play in a Grixis deck normally. And the way we're going to access these cards is with the Fae of Wishes. Fae of Wishes gives you the ability for 4 mana to choose a non-creature card from outside the game, so from the sideboard essentially, and you can do that a few times even, because you can cast it as a flyer and return it to your hand by discarding 2 cards. Of course, discarding 2 cards is a cost that's not negligible, but the Fae of Wishes has so much upside, and your deck is really built around finding the Fae of Wishes and getting cards from your sideboard. We also have a Thought Erasure, which is something that the Jeskai version of this deck obviously doesn't have because it doesn't have black in it. Thought Erasure is a very impactful card. I normally put 4 of them in my decks, but at this time I only found room for 3 of them because we have so many great cards in this deck. What Thought Erasure can do at best in the early game, but also later, it can discard 1 card of your opponent's hand. You choose, of course, yourself. It can also surveil, so it helps you get to your Fae of Wishes. And it gives you the information about your opponent's hand, which is very, very impactful. So if you want to know what your opponent does, play a Thought Erasure and you will have a strategy you can use against them. Tyrant Scorn is also a very important card that is not in the Jeskai version. It is the ability to basically destroy one creature with converted mana cost 3 or less, or return a creature to its owner's hand, which can be your creature. You can return the Fae of Wishes, but you can also return something big your opponent made, or return or destroy tokens, destroy small creatures. So the Tyrant Scorn is very nice, especially in the early game. As most control decks, you will have problems surviving the early game, but once you've survived the early game, you can go off and, yeah, be very impactful with your deck and most of the times win the game. As another card for the early game, I have Mu Yanling, Sky Dancer, which is a planeswalker that I think is pretty underrated. You can use Mu Yanling every turn to make your opponent's creatures smaller and also strip them of their flying ability. And you can also create tokens that will help you block in the early game and yeah, just help you in general. I only have one I only have one of those because I only am in the possession of one of those cards, but I don't think I would have put in many more of this card because it's not that strong, but it's just another planeswalker you have for your Sarkhan win condition and for the early game, which is pretty nice. So one of the most important cards, of course, as in most control decks, is Narset, Potter of Wales, which can give you the ability to draw new cards, for example, removal spells or anything you really want, except for the Fae of Wishes. This is the only thing that also hindered me from playing the Murderous Rider in this deck, because Narset just misses it. So it's bad enough that it sometimes gets Fae of Wishes back to the bottom of your library, but it would be even worse if you had more creatures. That is why I don't have the Murderous Rider in this deck. But Narset is a very nice card to find almost anything besides the Fae of Wishes or lands. And you can find the Bedevil, you can find Drawn from Dreams, everything you really want. And especially the Fires of Invention. You will need to find Fires of Invention as quickly as possible in this deck, because it's really your main win condition to play Fires of Invention and go off with your cards. So you want to use Narset, and if you find the Fires, you will almost always take the Fires, except if you already have a Fires or something, but most of the times you're gonna play Narset to get the Fires. Bedevil is a card that is basically kind of a Murderous Rider with no drawbacks. The only drawback being that it's pretty hard to cast, like black and a red. But the mana base, which we come to later, is not that bad in this deck. So most of the time when you have free mana, you will be able to cast Bedevil. And this helps you destroying artifacts, creatures, or planeswalkers. So it's very versatile, especially with artifacts gaining some value in this format. It can be very nice to have a removal. It won't get rid of enchantments or anything, but yeah, it's a very flexible card. So I have 3 of them in this deck. Drawn from Dreams is your second most important draw spell. As you might see in this deck, we don't have something like Opt or more or less expensive forms of drawing. Of course, because of the Fires, you will want to play as many high-cost cards as you can, because you can use your mana so efficiently on high-cost cards. This is one of the reasons we play Drawn from Dreams. Drawn from Dreams costs 1 mana more than Narset, but it's most of the times a better effect, because it can draw you lands, it can draw you your Fae of Wishes you need. So I'm thinking about maybe putting one Narset out of the deck and one more Drawn from Dreams, but most of the times you need the Narset as quickly as possible to get your Fires, and you play the Drawn of Dreams after you play the Fires. So that's why I only have 2 of them, but I think if you want to include 3 or something, that's definitely worth. You can definitely try that. It's a very nice card. You dig through 7 cards and get 2 of them at will, so you can't have any better things with a card draw. You can't expect more. And it's not even drawing a card. So this is one reason why Narset is so important. Your opponent can only draw 1 card each turn. This means that their card draw spells will mostly lose all of their effects. And this is the reason why we play so many Narsets. One of those reasons. Yeah, so Drawn of Dreams, a very nice card. Ritual of Soot is a very nice sweeper in this deck. It destroys all the small creatures your opponent might have with a converted mana cost 3 or less. It also destroys your creatures, so you don't want to play it if you have Fair of Wishes or a lot of tokens you need on the field. But it can really help you against those aggressive decks, for example the Red Cavalcade decks. If you can get to round 4 and have a Ritual of Soot, you most likely just nuke their board, which can win you the game almost single-handedly. So Ritual of Soot is a very important sweeper. That's why we have 3 of them in the deck. So Fires of Invention we already discussed. Next card is Sarkhan the Masterless, which is basically not the win condition, but one of the ways you are going to win. If you have met your condition of drawing a lot of cards and having fires out. Sarkhan can create a dragon with its minus ability, and this dragon also attacks every creature or it damages every creature that attacks Sarkhan or something else. So you will have a lot of great ways to block with this dragon and to have 1/1 creatures basically be useless for your opponent because they take 1 damage when they attack. And the most important ability of Sarkhan is, of course, its +1 ability. You make every planeswalker you have into a dragon. You will have to watch out that the planeswalker you play this turn, where you play the Sarkhan, will have Summoning Sickness, so you can only make the planeswalkers attack that you have already played on the battlefield. You will have to watch out for that. And maybe play the other planeswalkers 1 turn before you play the Sarkhan. So Nicol Bolas, Dragon God, is one of the most impactful Grixis cards we have in the format. It has all loyalty abilities of all other planeswalkers on the battlefield, not only yours, also the other person's planeswalkers. So it is very flexible. It can do stuff like ticking Chandra, tick up, giving your opponent the emblem to damage them or something like that. So it's very nice. It can also draw you a card and your opponent has to exile a card. They can choose what card to exile from their hand or battlefield. So it's not that great, but it's good to have a card draw engine. So you most of the times just use this +1. Also, you have a -3 ability, which can destroy a target creature or planeswalker. And since you start with 4 loyalty, you can just play your Bolas, destroy the opponent's soul creature, and just go off the turn after that. So it's a very nice type of removal. Liliana is also nice if you want to remove creatures. It can remove 2 creatures in the first turn with its -4 ability. It can create you zombie tokens every turn, and it also gives you the ability to draw more cards if your creature dies. Its ultimate is very impactful as well, but you most of the times won't get to it, and Liliana is a bit expensive with 6 mana, but having the Fires of Invention, you can easily play Liliana and Chandra in the same turn, which is just amazing. Chandra is also a very nice card. I have 2 of them in the deck, in the main board, because for one, they can't be countered, which is nice, because one of your most debilitating matchups is going to be Simic Flash. So if you can get to the point where you have 6 mana for the Chandra, it can be very helpful against Simic Flash. Otherwise, you're just going to lose against Simic Flash. It's really the only deck that can hold its ground against this deck. So the Field of the Dead deck can't do much because of the Unmourned Ego in the sideboard, which we will talk about later. And other decks are also not that great against Grixis Walkers, but yeah, Simic Flash can just destroy you generally anything with counter spells, but most likely it's a Simic Flash deck if it has a counter spell in this meta. So Chandra, you can tick up Chandra to get an emblem for your opponent that damages them each turn for 1 damage, which is of course very impactful because it doesn't go away. Emblems can't be removed at any form, and it just keeps getting bigger because you can build another emblem each turn, and it can get out of hand very quickly. You can also make emblems with Nicol Bolas, which has the added benefit to tick Nicol Bolas up for 2 loyalties except for 1. Instead of 1 with its normal ability. So you can use this Chandra to make Bolas more impactful, to get him to his ultimate, where you just most of the times win the game. So it's a very, very impactful card in this deck. You can also deal 3 damage to each non-elemental creature. You have to watch out that it's not elemental creatures. It happened to me a few times that I just played this minus ability and then noticed, oh, my opponent is playing an elemental deck. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. So you have to watch out for that. For those creatures, you can use the -X ability that deals X damage to the target creature or planeswalker. This ability also gives you the chance to remove planeswalkers, to remove cards that are smaller than 3 toughness. If you don't want to use the -3, your opponent only has 1/1, but you want to get rid of this 1/1 because it has nice abilities. You just play the -1, you only lose 1 loyalty, and then you're fine, and your opponent has 1 creature less. So it's very, very nice card, flexible card that can be useful in most situations. That's why I have 2 of them and 1 in the sideboard. The Castle Ventress is a card that will help you use your mana in the late game because you have Fires of Invention out. You never have to pay your mana, which means you will always have mana to spend to do the Castle Ventress active, which is scrying 2 cards, bringing you closer to your Fae of Wishes or other cards that you need, and giving you a very nice way of using your mana in the late game when you have Fires of Invention out. And you have just mana lying around that does nothing. With Castle Ventress, it does something because you will need to play at least 5 mana to make it happen. You also have some basic lands here, islands, swamps, and mountains, just to have ways of playing untapped in the early game. I think that is very important in this type of deck, because you will have a weak early game as it is, and playing tapped lands or playing lands that cost you life can be very debilitating against aggro decks. So this is why we have a lot of basic lands comparatively. We also have the Watery Grave, which is just a standard shock land. You pay 2 life and can make it untapped. You can also just play it tapped with no life cost, and it does. It makes you 2 types of mana. The same is true for the Steam Vents. I used to have only 2 of them because I only own 2 of them, but I spent my wildcards on them because it's so important to get red mana. You won't want to run out of red mana in this deck. To get the Fires of Invention, you'll need at least 1 mana. And after that, it's basically, it doesn't matter what type of lands you play, but this you will really, really need. We also have a Temple of Epiphany, just to get more red mana, also more blue mana, because blue mana is also very, very needed for Narset and Drawn of Dreams, because they have 2 blue mana, and also Mu Yanling, of course. So yeah, I put in a bit more swarms to have a way of playing Nicol Bolas even without the fires, but you will need blue and red mana. That's why I had a Temple of Epiphany as well. Also, you have a Blood Crypt, because it's another shock land. It can help you get to a lot of different manas in the early game, and yeah, it won't hurt you in the late game, because you can just play lands tapped in the late game if you have Fires of Invention out. It doesn't matter if they can actually make mana. You can just play the Fabled Passage without it searching for anything. You can just leave your lands laying on the battlefield if you have the Fires of Invention and you don't want to Castle Ventress. Fabled Passage is a way of getting your mana you need in the early game. It's very important. You'll most likely play this on turn 1 or turn 4 or after that, because it only gives you untapped lands if you have 4 lands on the battlefield. So 3 lands and the Fabled Passage, you can play it. Do a search for a basic land that is untapped, which is also one reason we have at least 2 of each type of land in the deck, to search for them with the Fabled Passage. And yeah, you can fix your mana problems with that and get to your Fires of Invention or other spells, Ritual of Soot maybe. And you can play it turn 1, of course, because you don't have a 1-drop in this deck. So you don't play any card with mana cost 1 or less. And so it doesn't really matter what you do on turn 1. You just want to play the land that has the most downside if you played it in later rounds. So if you have some kind of shock land, you will want to play it untapped in turn 1, or if you have the Temple of Epiphany, you play it in turn 1 because it's always tapped. Or you want to play the shock lands, of course, tapped, not untapped. And you will have a good way of doing something in the second round, hopefully. And after that, you're just gonna get stronger and stronger. So this was the main board of the deck. As I mentioned, the Fae of Wishes gives us the ability to grab something from the sideboard. So most of the times what I want to do is play the Fires of Invention, have 4 mana. With the 4 mana, in the next turn, I grab something with Fae of Wishes and immediately play it. So your opponent won't have any way to react if they don't have a counterspell. So this is why I'm not usually playing Fae of Wishes during the turn where I play the Fires of Invention, because I can only play 2 spells, and then my opponent is gonna know what I'm gonna do. Sometimes you, of course, have to do it, but most of the times I want to keep it a secret what I have in my sideboard and what I want to play. And in the sideboard we have the Elder Spell, which can, of course, destroy as many Planeswalkers as you want, and also give you 2 loyalty counters for each Planeswalker destroyed this way. So just yesterday I had a game where I won with Nicol Bolas' ultimate, because my opponent had 2 Planeswalkers on the field, and I played in the same turn I played Nicol Bolas, then the Elder Spell on 2 of their Planeswalkers, and ticked my Nicol Bolas up to 8. And since my opponent only had the Planeswalkers that were legendary and no legendary creatures, I could use the ultimate right away and win the game just perfectly out of the blue. My opponent had no chance to do anything. I mean, he saw what I had in hand, but he couldn't do anything against that. But it's a very nice way to end the game. It can also just destroy Planeswalkers that are annoying with your opponent. Ashiok Dreamrender is a card you mostly know from mill decks, because it mills your opponent and also exiles their graveyard. You will use it mostly for, or almost exclusively for, their ability to exile cards from the graveyard, or exile the whole graveyard. Because in this format you have decks like, for example, the Cauldron Familiar deck that wants to come back from the graveyard, or the Esper Dance of the Man's deck that can bring stuff back from the graveyard, and also stuff like Grixis Reanimator, for example, that all want to bring stuff back from the graveyard. You just play the Ashiok and exile all the things they have in the graveyard. It's perfect. You can do it multiple times, even if you keep your Ashiok on the battlefield, and it just can win you the game so often. And if your opponent doesn't have anything like that, you don't have to play it, because it's only in the sideboard. It doesn't take any space from your main deck. This is the most important thing about Fae of Wishes. You can have very specific cards in your sideboard without taking away any space of your main board, which is very nice in best of ones, because you're not needing your sideboards anyway. Unmourned Ego is the card I use against the Field of the Dead. You just name Field of the Dead, exile all of them, and then your opponent most of the time has just lost if they hadn't already played one, and they only have a chance to play with stuff like the Hydroid Crazes or something, but most of the times they will lose that match. This is the reason why this deck is so good against Field of the Dead decks. You can just grab Unmourned Ego and play it at the same turn, and they can't do anything about it. So it's very nice with this type of deck. Oko, Thief of Crowns, is mostly to make food tokens. It can give you the ability to create a food token, which you can sacrifice for free life. You also have to pay 2 mana for the food token, but it doesn't matter, because you don't use your mana most of the times, because you have Fires of Invention. And of course you will need to have Fires of Invention to even cast Oko, because you don't have any green mana. So this is the first card that really couldn't be played without Fires of Invention. Same goes for Kaya's Wrath, which is the best mana-wise sweeper in the format. You can destroy all the creatures of your opponent, playing 4 mana. Of course, your deck doesn't have white mana, so you will need the fires to get this card. Or you could get it, but to play it, you will need the fires. Same goes for Outlaw's Merriment. You will also need the fires for that. And Outlaw's Merriment is just something that can give you a very broad board state pretty quickly, because it makes tokens every turn. On your turn, can also give you tokens with lifelink. So you have another option beside the Oko to gain some life. Because you won't have any life gain in your main deck, it's very nice to have something out of the sideboard that can help you gain the life back that you lost in the early game. Because as I said, your early game is pretty weak. We also have another Sarkhan here, just to be able to get Sarkhan whenever you need them and not be reliant on drawing them actually. I was thinking about maybe putting a Fires of Invention in the sideboard. I just haven't done it yet because my sideboard is pretty full and I want to play the Fires before I get the Fae of Wishes. So that's why I play 4 Fires of Invention in the main board, but only 3 Sarkhan the Masterless, and get 1 Sarkhan out of the sideboard. The same arguments apply to Nicol Bolas Dragon God. You can also get it from the sideboard if you don't draw it in your main board, and you just have another way of drawing them. Also goes for Chandra. Command the Dreadhorde is a way in control mirrors, where your opponent plays another control deck to just get your destroyed planeswalkers back from the graveyard. Most of the times in control matchups you will have a lot of life, so it doesn't matter that it costs you a lot of life to get those cards back. You just have to count how much life you really need, how much life your opponent can take with burn spells, so you'll have to weigh those factors out. But if you do that, Command the Dreadhorde can be very impactful and win you the game. Casualties of War is another card that is very useful against Field of the Dead, because it is the only card in your deck that can destroy lands. It also destroys a lot of other things and just gives you a way if your opponent has very different types, if they have artifacts and creatures and enchantments or something like that, and multiple types of permanents you want to destroy, you will want to go for Casualties of War for the price of 6 mana, destroying their stuff. Garruk is a card that can also destroy creatures, as can the Nicol Bolas, but it can also create you some tokens and maybe get you the ultimate. I think it's a pretty okay card. It's not the best card in your deck. I'm always thinking about whether I should kick him out, but sometimes he does great work. He can destroy creatures and draw you a card at the same time, so that's a very important thing as well. Comparing to Bolas, which can only destroy stuff. And yeah, the tokens are just very nice way to have board state. And your opponent would not want to destroy those tokens because it would take up Garruk and bring him to his ultimate. Ugin the Ineffable is another card that can give you tokens. It's very nice, and it also can destroy a permanent that's 1 or more colors. So anything that you want to destroy, for example, planeswalkers or artifacts or enchantments, Ugin can just do. And at its first turn as well, because you have 4 loyalty and this costs -3. But you can also exile the top of your library, get you some card advantage, get you some tokens. So it's a very nice card to have in this deck. So that's basically it. This is my Grixis Walkers deck. I hope you like it. I hope you try it out, because it's a very fun deck. It wins, as I said, against Field of the Dead decks. And it's just very nice all around to play as a control deck in best of ones. But you could probably also play this in best of threes. Yeah, I hope you like it. I will upload the gameplay probably on Thursday. I'm still feeling a bit achy in my throat, so maybe I won't be able to do it then, but I hope I will be able to, and I hope you turn in next time when it's MTG Deck Tech. Until then, I hope you subscribe, like it, and we'll see each other.